Hello, agentpreneurs, and welcome to episode 108 of the Daily List Report. I hope you got a chance to enter our little contest last week. We're going to announce the winners this Friday, those $300 gift cards. Thank you for your support and for sharing this channel. This is a labor of love for us here at List Reports, and we really enjoy talking to amazing guests and bringing you what we hope is amazing content. So thank you again for all of your support. Today we have an incredible show. I'm super excited about this. We have Jonathan Spears coming on. Jonathan is an amazing agent with an amazing background, $600 million in sales before he turned 30, which is hard to imagine, certainly hard to relate to. But what that means is that there's a lot that we can learn from him. Jonathan actually started college when he was 14, which is pretty amazing. So he got an early start on college. He got an early start on real estate. We're going to talk with him and understand a little bit more about why he chose real estate, what makes him successful, what constitutes his brand, something that is a common theme on this show. But without further ado, let me bring Jonathan on right now. Jonathan, why don't you say hello to the agentpreneurs of List Reports?
Hello, thanks so much for having me. Randy, I'm such a big fan and just excited to be here and share a little bit of my background.
Thank you, Jonathan. That's a humbling thing to hear you say, so I appreciate that very much. Jonathan, why don't we start here, right? I always give our guests a chance to introduce themselves. I want everybody out there to get to know who you are. Again, you started college when you were 14, and so you could have done anything and you chose real estate. Would love to hear a little bit about sort of your journey into real estate and maybe what, the first 12 years of your career has been like, which has been a rocket ship, but I'll let you say it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Jonathan Spears. I live in the Florida Panhandle, which is basically the Destin to 30A area. I serve a market that is primarily second home investment properties. So we get a lot of influx throughout the Southeast and beyond. And we're very fortunate to call Destin home just because of the naturalistic surroundings that we live in. So we've got white sand beaches, emerald green waters, and just a very laid back approach. My background, you had mentioned I did start college at 14. And for me, it's kind of interesting. Back then, kids in my class used to call me Doogie Howser. And I had no idea who Doogie Howser was at the time. I had to get on YouTube like a typical millennial and look all of that up. But then started to fall in love with the character, especially because he's played by Neil Patrick Harris, who was great.
Yes.
But when people called me Doogie, it started to make sense because basically I would get my mom, who drove me to school, drop me off, and I was able to get my education early. So I was thankful for that. But background on me is that I was very entrepreneurial. So as a kid, I was working odds and ends jobs, obviously get my mom to take me to school and then also drop me off at my job after school. I was just very driven. I knew that I wanted to start a career in business in particular. I studied business, finance. And
Jonathan, what was your first job? Sorry to interrupt, but I love this story. I have a weird first job too, but what was your first job?
Okay, you're going to love this. So my very first job was sort of real estate related. I worked for a surveying crew in the summer, cutting line for surveyors. So really they handed me a machete, which I think I was 14 at the time, and was basically blazing trails through the woods trying to figure out property boundaries. So that was my first experience, not only with real estate, but also as an employee. So
that's interesting.
that was a fun start, especially because in Florida it's 100 degrees in the summer. So
it's got to be
not
gross.
ideal.
That's crazy.
Now you got to tell me, what was your first job?
So my first job. So I grew up playing golf. Golf was my first love. Loved to play golf. And if you've ever been to a driving range, you got these driving range balls and they have a stripe on them so that you don't steal them, and it's really embarrassing if you're playing with a range ball on the golf course, right? Well, back then, this course that I went to work at because I wanted free golf and I wanted free lunch and free range balls. We had a bunch of lakes there, and so my very first job was painting a red stripe on the balls that became range balls. So we take the ones that weren't good enough to resell, and I'd sit in a little room with probably lead-based paint, the little machine, and it would spin the ball, and I'd dip it in the can, and I would touch it, and I would paint the red stripe on the golf ball. That was my very first job back when I was about 13.
That's awesome. That's epic. Okay, now that I know you're a golfer, you're going to have to come down to Florida and play a couple rounds.
I would love to. I would love to. Yes, as soon as we can get on a plane, I am
Let's
there, and let's go play.
right, exactly. Awesome. Well, so just kind of going back to my college days. So I started when I was 14. I ended up graduating with a degree in business from Florida State University by the time I was 19. So was able to fast track college. And about the time that I realized, where I wanted to go beyond college was the same time that I decided to get a real estate license. So I studied on my 18th birthday and obtained my real estate license, mainly because my parents were selling their house. And they had mentioned that if I got a license, they would allow me to assist their real estate agent on the transaction. And it was a decent sized transaction. And of course, when I saw what a commission check looked like, then I got extremely motivated. So got my real estate license, helped assist them on that, which was a short sale. And at the time, that short sale was pretty complicated to work through.
Absolutely.
Today, a lot of the transactions we're doing are not necessarily distressed. So it was a great problem solving opportunity and really a nice way to watch a veteran in the industry problem solve. And that's something that really sparked my interest in real estate because I love solving problems for people. And that entrepreneurial side also saw an opportunity to scale in a business where problems need to be solved. And for someone who went through college during the Great Recession, which I remember sitting in economic class and I was watching my Palm Pilot at the time because it was before the iPhone. And Lehman Brothers was collapsing, and it was just shocking to me, but also a really humbling education, especially as I started out in my journey in a personal career path.
That's really fascinating. Let me ask you a question. I want to get to know you a little bit better. What did you almost become?
Ooh,
so you became a real estate agent, but what did you almost become?
So if one of my greatest passions is real estate, my other great passion is travel. And for me, I wanted to go and study international business abroad. So I looked at different business schools in London, and highly considered moving to Europe. But the financial aspect was not there for me at the time. So, I didn't necessarily come from wealth. My parents weren't in a position that I could go off to school like that. And so I took advantage. The reason I started college so early is because I took advantage of a homeschool program where my education was paid by the state of Florida. And so I ended up getting out of college not only early, but also debt free.
That's amazing.
So yeah, it was just an incredible blessing. So for me, if I was going into a different career field, it would have been something internationally.
Interesting. No, that's fascinating. I love that. When I interview people that were hiring for this company, we talk about, where they went to school, for example. I always ask them, where they almost went to school, because I think it reveals a lot about the individual, frankly. So I think that's interesting. Jonathan, one of the Business Insider articles on you that I read talked about your daily schedule, and you've got, frankly, a hell of a schedule, right? You're up at 6:30, you're going till 11 o'clock at night, and I'm sure there's some nights that's longer. But let's talk more about that, but I want to talk about it also in the context of, have you always been that way, right? So when you started, have you just always been super hustle, super go, go, go? Talk a little bit about what your day looks like, and if that's something that came later, or if that's something that's sort of always been a part of who you are.
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. For me, like, my background was definitely, as far as I can remember, I've always been super driven. Even to the point where, a transition from like being a child to a young adult, I was a little bit overweight as a kid. And I ended up, like, the age of 12, 13, starting to realize, okay, girls don't really respond well to somebody that's not in great shape. It motivated me to get in shape. And so I think I was 12 or 13. I ended up getting on a weight loss journey, which is pretty young to be doing that. But, I hadn't necessarily taken care of myself as a child, and lost 100 pounds in that time frame, which, it was an incredibly disciplined approach. And I've literally taken my life, not only from, my physical journey, but also business, spiritual, familial, in a disciplined manner because of that experience. So it taught me a lot about making certain changes and sticking to them, committing to them, and seeing the results of that. And that was a pretty dramatic change. So because of that experience, I think it really has helped solidify the way that I go about my life today.
Interesting. So talk a little bit about what your day looks like, right? Jonathan, one of the things that I like to tell all of the agents who are watching is, this is your playbook, right? This is what works for you. And it doesn't mean that this is going to work for somebody else, but understanding other people's playbooks and their routines is helpful because you can sort of craft your own version of that. And frankly, sometimes people just need a playbook. They just need to know how can I optimize or maximize my probability of success? And I think a lot of the things that you do embody that, and you're not going to end up in a worse place if you followed your schedule, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, for me, like my schedule's birthed out of, like you said, figuring out what works best for me. I started intermittent fasting, which I realized works really well from a dietary standpoint for me, for my body
Too.
type. From a business standpoint, I don't necessarily have to be up at 6:30 immediately starting my day. Some people in my office, like my brother, for instance, he starts his day at 5 o'clock. And so at 5 a.m., he feels like he can be most productive. My clients typically want to talk to me 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night because that's after their business day.
Yes.
And that's usually my time to be optimally productive. So just running through my schedule briefly, 6:30 is usually my wake up call. I've got a 2.5-year-old that really dictates when we get up. So the alarm set for 6:30, sometimes it's a little earlier. On a Sunday, sometimes it's a little later. But as soon as I wake up, I try to get a little bit of family time in, respond to the emails that I need to, and then do a daily workout from 7 to 8. And after 8 a.m., I'm really trying to focus on getting my day prepared, which typically starts the night before, just before I go to bed. But it bleeds over into the next day when we do a daily huddle call at 9:15. So I operate a team of 9. And we've got 3 admin that all come together collectively to figure out what are the most important tasks that we're going to accomplish today. And that's what our morning calls for. We're either doing it 3 to 4 days a week. Sometimes it's more or sometimes it's less, depending on the workload and what we need to focus on. But after that, I mean, my day's wide open.
Can I interject on that one real quick? Because there's a nice parallel, right? As one of the founders of a technology company, right? There's a concept in technology called a StandUp. And that's what you're talking about, right? So in a development or a product environment, your stand-up is quick, right? And you get, let's say it's every morning. We did one this morning at 9 a.m., right? And you go around the room and everybody says, here's what I did yesterday. Here's what I'm going to do today. And here are any blockers that I have so that they're identified readily, right? I want to do this, but I can't because so-and-so didn't do this or something's broken or whatever. And it's meant to be, I don't know how long yours lasts, but we're talking a minute a person. Here's what I did yesterday, here's what I'm doing today, and here are any blockers that I have. And any deep discussions are then taken offline, like, okay, let's get together and address that, but not in the stand-up. So it's meant to be a great way to start the day. Is that how you run yours?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I've got 3 to 4 people on the call and we're getting 2 to 3 minutes each.
Yes.
So we're not only talking about what we did yesterday, but also what our daily schedule looks like. And I always tell my agents, it's like swallow the frog at the beginning of the day. So take your most difficult tasks and focus on them first. And so that stand up for us is what are the most difficult tasks today and how can we help each other accomplish those efficiently?
Absolutely. That's awesome. Okay, so you get out of your stand-up and what's next?
So it varies, but typically I'm heading into prospecting immediately. Any type of follow-up from the previous day is done then, first and foremost. And any of my most difficult tasks of the day, whether it's negotiating a contract that may have come in over the previous evening, or maybe I've got a tough message I've got to deliver to a buyer or seller, I'm doing that first. Whatever I know that my mental block's going to be, I need to get it out of the way.
Nice.
So that's going to be my initial start to the day. And then it's moving on to what task can I be most proactive with. So if I know that I've got a specific seller I've been going after and I need a price reduction, then that's what I'm going after. If I know I've got a day full of showings, I'm prepping for those showings. So typically the start of my day is trying to get the most difficult task out of the way and then focusing on what's going to be most productive for that day. And I mean, that can extend through, 5 o'clock. It can extend through 11 o'clock at night. It just depends on the day. And that's one thing that I love about our business is that it's always changing. And so
Yes.
there's always new things that come up, which is exactly why we try to eat the frog first, because I'm going to get 10 more frogs that day that I'm going to have to swallow regardless. So I want to make sure that I get the previous days out of the way.
It's so true and it's so important. And for most people, it's so hard to do, right? You get that to-do list going and you're like, I want progress. Well, I want progress. So you're like, let me do all the easy things first, right? I feel like we should reinvent the to-do list, and the things that are the frogs, right, should be in a larger font, or they should take up 10 lines, right? Because it's so easy to just take out the easy things. And maybe we should title this episode "Eat the Frog" first, because I love that. That's really good.
Yeah, I know. It's good, but it's also practical, right? It's
Yeah.
what sets us up for success. And that's the whole goal. We're not trying to spin our wheels, do anything, but make sure that we're positioned well and positioning our clients for success too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you are one of the top 250 agents in the entire country, which is a hell of a badge that I'm sure you wear proudly. How did you
Absolutely.
get to that point, Jonathan? Like, you started off, talk a little bit about, you started off in this business, and obviously you moved quickly and you built a team and you built success, but how did you get to that level?
So coming into the business, I really started in a unique way. Basically, the phase we were at in the market, 2010 is when I first got a license. I was 18, and we were knee deep in the Great Recession, especially here in this market in Florida. We were experiencing the BP oil spill that year, which was devastating for Gulf Coast states,
Yeah.
and certainly not encouraging for the real estate market, especially because our market thrives on tourism. And with the perception, I remember the CNN live camera of oil pumping out of the ground. The perception was, there's oil all over our beaches.
Right.
So, for me, that was my start. And some would have said, hey, this is the worst time to ever get into real estate. But I believe that it was the most incredible education, because the level of problem solving and the skill set that I had to develop in order to be successful at that time was so different than what it takes today to do deals. So when I first got a license, I worked as an assistant for a couple years at what I call a foreclosure factory, which was essentially a top agent in our market whose business model was solely working with different banks. And for me, my position was doing broker price opinions. So I was pricing property from, and for my area, a very large swath of space, Pensacola to Tallahassee, for different banks like Fannie Mae, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and trying to help them determine, okay, what's this property worth? What are we going to list it at? So helping them take a strategic approach. And I know some days I was doing 30 or 40 BPOs per day.
Wow.
And it gave me a very well-rounded understanding of the area. And it also created a foundation of knowledge from a statistical standpoint that I could take to educate a prospective seller on what their property's worth and how to price it well in the market. And that's really an approach that, we've taken from then throughout the entire duration of my career thus far. And it was an incredible learning experience.
So you started there, doing this foreclosure pricing and all of that,
Yeah.
and then you made the jump, right? So you joined. Did you join a team? Did you go out on your own? Did you sort of, I don't know, cobble together a team and start from
Yeah.
there? Like, what was next for you?
So what's interesting is I was on a team, right? So that first interaction in real estate, that was a team oriented phase, and I was working under a top producer, which I think was incredibly helpful for me. I feel like I got a paid education, so it was certainly a value. But the next step was really understanding what I was passionate about. There's a certain point you get to where you're not really doing something for a paycheck. You're trying to understand, what is it that I'm doing in the world that I love and that I can continue doing and I can scale. And so we would get these slivers of foreclosure inventory that were luxury product. And as soon as I would see it, I felt so excited. I was passionate about the opportunity. It gave me a really good reason to be proactive and to call up an investor base that I had built over time. And that luxury market was something that was obviously difficult to break into, but a little elusive based on the type of inventory we were selling, which, I've sold everything from an $18,000 mobile home to, $15 million piece of property. So it's a pretty large a gap, but I realized very quickly, like for me, like what I wanted to do was the higher end inventory. And so the way I cultivated that and that business in particular was I would watch the hot sheet and I would filter it from high to low. And so I would start understanding the inventory in the market that was trading every day on the luxury end and becoming very proficient with it. So that if somebody called me and they had a question, they said, hey, what else do you have for $1 million in that market? I could immediately go to, well, hey, look, this is the best deal. This is the best opportunity. Here's something that I just saw pop up. So having that proficiency and that ability to talk intelligently about the product, not only because I was fueled by it from a passion standpoint, but also because I understood it.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Why don't we do this? Let's take a minor detour, right? Because you're talking about luxury property, right? And yesterday's show was with Joyce Ray. She's 40 years in the business. She's a top luxury real estate agent in the west side of Los Angeles. She sold a $150 million property last year. I think for those listening right now who want to break into sort of the luxury market, talk about that a little bit, right? Because it's a different type of clientele. And you said that you're in an area with a lot of second homes. And so I wonder, some of these luxury properties are probably beach homes, right? That are not a primary residence. How do you crack into that, especially somebody who's young, right? You're not bringing decades of experience. You said you didn't come from significant wealth, so it wasn't like you're just calling up all your parents' friends. How do you break into a luxury market?
So for me, and that's like actually a really great statement because, Joyce's business is going to be different than mine based on our geographical area. Our market, the average sales price is sub 2 million, which if you're in a certain area, that sounds like a lot. And then if you're in Orange County, that sounds like a little, right? So the luxury market is different everywhere. And, no matter where you're at, I think if you're excited about something, you're passionate about it, there's really not much that's going to stand in your way from going after it other than your own personal will. And so being a young guy, I realized that I needed to create value. And creating value is the only way that I was able to get my foot from selling a $15,000 HUD house to a $15 million luxury property. And the way that I did that was not only understanding the market, but starting to understand the supply and the demand in the market. The luxury market transacts much less often than the rest of the market, right? Higher price point, there's going to be lower demand inevitably, but there will also be familiar faces. And so what I started off with in my business was focusing on investors who were accumulating a portfolio of luxury property. And so my background being in business and finance, I looked at it as how could I create value with somebody who wants to have a luxury property portfolio? And coming from the foreclosure world, we were often frequented by investor type profiles that wanted to go after that inventory. And at the time I had that access to the supply. So like my business model when I was working foreclosures was very reactive, mainly because I had a ton of supply and I was able to kind of feed that interest with certain investors. When I transitioned, to where I'm at now at Sotheby's International Realty, it was more proactive, and I was looking at the tools in my tool belt, especially with Sotheby's, that allowed me to create value for a particular customer. And so now my calls are less, hey, this is Jonathan. I've got a great foreclosure coming up. And hey, this is Jonathan, and I've got an incredible success story I need to share. And let me tell you how I sold your neighbor's house for the highest price per square foot in the market. And people start to listen. They gravitate towards you because of the value that you provide. And I can tell you one thing, they smell the commission breath a mile away. So when I plan to pick up my phone now and try to get my foot into a door, I'm making sure that it's all about the customer and it's not about me at that point. But just to answer your question, I mean, the other piece is being a young guy. So I started in this business at 18 and I'm only 28 now. So still obviously sub 30. Folks will look at me when I show up at an appointment and go, are you out of high school? how did you get here? Like, are you Jonathan's assistant? Like, I don't understand.
Sure.
And, it was kind of exciting because I was able to, throw in the Doogie Howser jokes and a couple other things, but I just got very comfortable with who I was. And I wasn't trying to be anybody that I wasn't, right?
Yes.
My
Yes.
goal was to be authentic.
Jonathan, you said so many things there that matter, and I'll repeat a couple of them, right? Right now, that what you just said, which is you got comfortable with who you are, right? This is who I am. That's number one. Number two, you said leading with value. It is the only thing that matters, right? And I'll give a stupid sort of anecdote, right? But I've founded multiple companies, right? As a founder, we get people calling us all the time, and so every now and then you'll get some consultant that you get introduced to, and you get on the phone, you're like, okay, tell me about yourself, and then at some point, inevitably, they say, well, I know what you need to do. And I'm like, okay, well, what should we do? He's like, well, you haven't hired me yet. That's not value first. If the only value that you're bringing is what you could tell me right now on a phone call, then this is not going to happen, right? That's not value first. And the third piece, and this was evident in my interview last week with Gogo, a top agent in Michigan, is she talked about her first sort of $1 million listing. And she had done nothing like that. And a lot of it is just, it was confidence, right? She knew who she was. She went in there and she wasn't able to tell the story that said, I've sold dozens of $1 million homes. She hadn't sold any of them, but she went in there and she said, I will work harder for you than anybody else, right? I want this. And there's something, this is a personal choice when somebody hires you. And so they see something in you. They're like, man, she's going to work hard for me. Or they see you and they're like, man, I just hired Doogie. How cool is that, right? There's all of these other reasons why, other than just your experience.
Well, Randy, let me speak to that point, because so many agents get caught up in their own personal accolades. And at the end of the day, your client, the only reason they care about your accolades is because they want you to mimic the success you've had elsewhere with them. Like the point that I'm getting to is results are the only reason that they would be oriented to hiring you. And if you go into a listing appointment and I talk about how I'm the top agent here and there and everywhere else, it's like, okay, well, how does that help me, right? Yeah. So that approach, just like the top agent from Michigan that you spoke with, I mean, are you still hungry? Now that you've had all these accolades, Are you still willing to work hard for us? What's the story? And I mean, those are the questions that I'm getting asked today. And it's one of the reasons that I grew a team.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome. Jonathan, kind of maybe as we bring this conversation to a close, a couple things. One, I just want to pull up and get your take on this. I have your Instagram here. Everybody watching, definitely follow Jonathan on Instagram. He's at Jonathan M. Spears. And we'll link to that as well. And you've got this great Instagram that showcases you and your daughter and your lovely wife and, real estate. And it's a bit aspirational, maybe in some ways. In a positive way, but this is real, right? This is not fake. This is your life right here. Yeah. I'd love for you to just touch on for a moment, because I don't think that social media is your primary channel for driving business. Whereas, to contrast that, Gogo, social media is everything for her, right? All of her business comes from social media. She doesn't do any paid lead acquisition. She doesn't pay Zillow a dime. She doesn't believe in that stuff. So where does social media fit into your plans?
So for me, social media is about lifestyle. And I think I'm more prominent on my Instagram stories than anything, just because I want to showcase not only the lifestyle of the beach, but the lifestyle that I enjoy, whether it's my passion for travel, which is extremely relatable to most of my clients, or my passion for my daughter and my family, which is also relatable to my customer base. Most of the customers that I interact with, they'll follow me on Instagram or on Facebook or Twitter, wherever else we're at social media wise, and they become really engaged in an area of your life beyond business. And so that's my goal with Insta, is being able to touch people and really showcase the fact that I'm human, and this is what I love and this is what I'm passionate about. And it is still an opportunity to showcase the lifestyle that our area affords. So I may be able to snap my beach day with my daughter, or a showing at Mont Blanc, which is one of the most expensive listings we have in the area. And really being able to give somebody content real time that's raw and unedited gives them a great look into your personality. And so that's what I try to accomplish with my social media.
I love that. That's tremendous. And I think that speaks to the authenticity. That speaks to you personally knowing who you are, right, and what your brand is, because then you're confident to share that, right? And I love it. I think every top agent that I've spoken to, one of the most compelling parts of their social media strategy is their stories, and it's those little insights into the day-to-day, whether it's, for Gogo feeding her kids and then running off to a call, and it's 12 o'clock at night and she's making lunches for the next day, but also like negotiating a contract, whatever it is, right? Those little glimpses and insights are what people relate to. And importantly, Jonathan, right? Not everybody's going to resonate with who you are, and that's okay. You need to be prepared to accept that not everybody's going to like you. I can't imagine anybody not liking you, Jonathan, if I'm being honest, but I'm sure there's somebody out there who doesn't like you, and you have to be okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan, like I told you when we prepped for this, right? 30 minutes goes by like that. If you can believe it, we've been talking for 30 minutes. It feels like we just got started.
All day, Randy.
I know. I feel the same way. Maybe what we'll do this time, Jonathan, if you don't mind, is we'll wrap this up. And if you're open to having another conversation, I would love to have you back on and talk about, anything. There's lots we can talk about.
Yeah, I'd love that. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Jonathan, thanks again for your time, for sharing, your experience. I love it. Every top agent out there is willing to sort of share their story, and I love hearing your story and your background, and I think this is tremendous advice for our agent partners out there. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Randy.
Absolutely, Jonathan. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
Thanks so much.
All right, bye. All right, well, there you have it. What a great conversation. Jonathan's fantastic. I mean, he's humble in his approach. Tremendous guy, tremendous background. Love the Doogie reference. Love the eat the frog first. I think we're going to call this episode that because that's true. And I know so many people who don't eat the frog first. They do the easy stuff first. And as he said, you're going to have 10 more frogs that are going to pop up, right, during your day. So either eat those frogs in the morning, get that stuff out of the way. Being authentic, knowing who you are, value first. Always, always, always value first. These are tremendous pieces of advice. So please consider following Jonathan on social media. Check out his stories, get a sense for his approach, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk to him again real soon. So until tomorrow, be safe, be healthy, be happy, eat those frogs, and we'll talk to you soon.